All right, so thank you for joining us on another episode of Meet the Candidates. I am joined by 4th District Congressional candidate Becky Grossman. Becky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, Becky, this is a stacked race. It is one that I think there's a lot of great candidates out there, but we're looking to separate now. The residents of Medfield are looking to find a candidate that they can cast their ballot for, and I'm so glad that we get the opportunity to showcase why they should vote for you.
So I am a Newton City Councilor, and as much as I love being a Newton City Councilor, the job that I cherish most is being a mom to my 2 kids. My daughter Madeline recently turned 9, and my son Jack recently turned 6. And I am running for Congress with the fierce urgency of a mom fed up by what is going on in this country and determined to make change. In my son Jack's first days of kindergarten, I had to have a conversation with him that parents all over this country have to have in trying to explain to him what it would mean to run in a zigzag pattern or find a quiet place to hide in his classroom if a school shooter were to show up there. That is not a conversation that any parent should ever have to have with their child, or a fear that any child should live with going to school. And we know how gun violence has torn apart communities of color for far too long. I want to go to Washington and take on the NRA. I refuse to allow Congress to offer thoughts and prayers after every school shooting, but fail to do anything to stop the next one. And that is why I want to take on the NRA. Right now, out of 435 members of Congress, we only have 25 who are mothers of school-age children. I believe that if we had 100 or 250 moms in Congress, it would change the conversation in Washington completely. And that if we are going to make progress on the issues that we care about, we need to be sending new and different types of leaders to take on powerful special interests.
Now, you certainly have a great issues. Your website, beckygrossman.com, is a great resource for people to go to check out not only your own story, which I think is great. We get to see lovely photographs of your family and what drives you and what motivates you, but also your issues. There's resources on COVID-19, certainly a website that people can go to and use for multiple resources. But I wanted to talk about, obviously you've already brought up the K-12 and the higher ed for parents. What are your stances on K-12? I know that you had some on the pay increases for teachers and expanding choices for colleges. Can you tell me a little bit about what drove those decisions?
As we were talking about, I look at the issues through the lens of what's in the long-term best interest for families and for young people and for the generations to come. And education is just absolutely key to that and is a topic of passion for me. I am committed to standing up to Republicans who try to strip money away from public education. Believe that we need to be deliberate about breaking down the inequities in opportunity in education and in school district funding. At the core of this, every student, regardless of their race, regardless of zip code, deserves a quality education. And for too long, we have prioritized investments for more affluent areas at the expense of communities that need the most help. And I believe that we do need to give teachers in America the pay that they deserve for their incredibly important work. And also that with respect to higher education, that the price of college is completely out of control, increasing at about 8 times the rate of wage increases over a comparable period of time. And that college needs to be far more affordable than it is today. That lack of resources is never something that should limit somebody from attaining higher education. And that we need to ensure that young adults have a menu of options to pursue as they are coming out of 12th grade to equip them to be competitive in whatever career they would like to pursue. And that begins with investing in and expanding access to community college, to apprenticeship and vocational and training and technical training programs, as well as four-year schools.
Yeah, I can tell you, I actually have two of my brothers are both working at schools. My brother Mike's at King Philip Regional High School, and so I know public education. He absolutely is a fantastic teacher, and the work that he does is so important. My brother Jeff coaches at a vocational school, and it's interesting to see it on that end of the hands-on experience that those students can get. So I was really actually, I was very happily surprised to see that your technical training programs that you talk about that as the opportunity for hands-on skill training for students as another option. I think when I went to college or when I went to high school, oftentimes we talk about college as like the only option and that you can only go to school for college. I think that is one of the things that may have blown up the prices, but I think it's great that you highlight community college training programs and labor apprenticeships as other options for students.
Yeah, well, and as I said, the menu of options, is really important, and making sure that we are providing young people with the tools that they need for success in whatever pursuit that is, meaningful for them and is going to enable our young people to, to live in a way that's going to be able to sustain their families economically. Because right now we know, I mean, you look at this district, there's a 5 times differential in annual median household income from the north to the south part of this district. That is a microcosm of the economic inequality that is taking place all over this country. And we know that different forms of education, whether it is technical and vocational training programs, whether it is community colleges, whether it is a four-year education, there's a wide variety of options that we have to get our young people, started on a career path that is going to sustain them throughout their adult lives and is going to put them in a place to be able to take care of their families for the long term.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm looking for things with candidates that maybe separate you at this point. One of the things that I think I saw on your page that I haven't seen on anyone else's, and this is something that, again, I'm a young man looking to get married, start a family. We're having that conversation of having kids of our own. Affordable childcare is something that I honestly, I didn't realize until it became an issue that was going to happen in my household that it's such an important thing. When a mother has to choose between being able to care for her kids or go and pursue her career, I thought that that's such an unfair choice that has to be made by anybody, never mind a parent who has to choose essentially their own professional career or their children. What's that like for you? I mean, you're
Yeah.
someone who this attacks every day, right?
Yeah, well, I really I appreciate the very thoughtful question. I mean, in my house, we've had every iteration of childcare at different times. There have been times that I've worked full time. There have been times that I've been at home with my kids. There have been times I've worked part time, and my husband has gone through different iterations as well. We've had experience where my kids have been in full time daycare. Currently, before the pandemic, our children were in the after school program in the Newton Public Schools, which was a wonderful program. And, then, of course, when schools shut down, a lot of the childcare options really changed for people. So, a lot of thoughts on this. And first of all, I recognize that knowing how hard it was for us, and we've got so much privilege in the resources that we have, as well as in the family that we have nearby to help us out and in the options that we have to pursue with childcare. And for so many families, that is not the case. And it wasn't the case before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, it's been absolutely devastating. You think about the frontline workers who don't have the luxury of doing their work from home behind a computer screen and are trying to put together this childcare picture. Meanwhile, so many of our childcare centers are really struggling to stay afloat right now. And the federal government has got to do more to make sure that that they can have a business and an operation to come back to on the other side of this. I think it's been something that really hasn't gotten enough attention in the pandemic. And, when we find our way through this incredibly difficult time and we're thinking about childcare and early childhood education for the long haul, accessible, affordable childcare. We know that every dollar that we invest in a child's life, especially in those very early years, pays major dividends in the long run in terms of what the rest of their lives are going to be like and what their opportunities are going to be. And that's why I believe passionately in universal pre-K, but it really starts before pre-K. It starts right at the beginning of a child's life. And for a lot of families, it's a really crushing load.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of times there's conversations with, especially pre-K, is the kids get put into a lottery and parents don't know whether they're going to be offered pre-K or not. They get these situations. So the universal pre-K was something that I noticed right away with you. I thought that that was something that was really thoughtful and really great. Paid family leave and sick leave for all workers, and to
Yep.
reduce the price of and expand childcare offerings. Great
Yes.
things that I thought that you had under the affordable childcare. Obviously, one of the biggest things that people are talking about today is racial justice, police reform.
Yes.
Tell me about your stances on these. Obviously, these are the topics that everyone's talking about right now. Can you tell me what separates you from everyone else?
Well, the systemic racism that is ingrained in our country and in our police forces is something that we have got to be honest about, and that we have got to confront head on. And I believe strongly that Black Lives Matter, that institutional racism is real and is deadly, and that we have got to enact a broad set of reforms when it comes to policing. I am committed to examining deeply and examining thoughtfully how we spend our money on our budgets with respect to our police forces, and how we think about increasing funding for mental health and social services, for education, for rehabilitation. I'm committed to ending qualified immunity for law enforcement, to creating review boards, civilian review boards to investigate police misconduct, to demilitarizing the police, and to a full ban, a federal ban on chokeholds. But it's not enough just to talk about reforming our police departments. That work is very important. We must do it. But institutional racism is built into every system in this country. And I think that we need to go system by system, whether we're talking about affordable housing, housing opportunity, and the effects of redlining that that remain, and how communities are drawn today, and in housing discrimination, in voting rights, in restoring the Voting Rights Act, and making sure that we're ending voter suppression. And we were talking a little bit earlier about some of the economic inequality in this district. The racial wealth gap is something that is inextricably linked with the systemic racism in this country, and we've got a lot to do to reverse 400 years of racial oppression.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that you also talk about in that racial justice and police reform, you talk about increasing mental health awareness, rehabilitation, and the education services, increasing those services as a response to demilitarizing the police. Can you talk about that, how those options might help in that case?
Yes. So, the importance to me, I mean, first of all, we have really failed in investing appropriately and adequately in mental health and social services across the board, with respect to this topic and with respect to so many other topics. When you think about criminal justice reform and how we handle, you know, cases that come into a courtroom, particularly with respect to some kind of criminal offense. We have an opportunity, especially for people as they many times are having their first interaction with the criminal justice system, to be helping somebody to turn their life around. And we are missing that opportunity to provide those mental health services, to provide the social services, and to be really investing in folks and getting on the right path as opposed to penalizing. And that's really what I'm talking about, is that there's no doubt that we have underfunded these areas, and that if we are going to tackle systemic racism, we have to look at how each and every one of these topics and how we offer or don't offer these services to our community is going to play out. And you know, to me, reimagining public safety as a whole is really the underlying value here. What is it that makes our communities actually safe and makes everybody in our communities actually feel safe as well? And thinking about how we can invest in somebody's future as opposed to how we can penalize them is really what that's about in my mind.
Yeah, you know, Becky, reading your stance on that, I actually really looked at that as you really reimagined a different perspective on how we can actually treat and keep our streets safe, was with higher mental health rehabilitation. I thought is a topic that I feel like we definitely need to be looking into. It's not enough just to punish people, but actually to rehabilitate them and talk about how they can come out of the justice system better than they went in. I thought that was a really great point that you made there.
Appreciate that.
Going into actually a topic that in Medfield is one that comes up a lot, is affordable housing, is one that we are definitely, we just surpassed the threshold for in Medfield. And so we are in that, we just passed it. So that was great. Tell me about affordable housing. Why is it so important? And what are some of the things that you're looking to do for that?
Yeah, so you know, affordable housing is something that I am very passionate about, because the cost of housing throughout this country, and certainly in this district, has just gotten you know, totally out of control. And you know, this is about a child and a family having a home. It's really that simple. It's something I've been really passionate about in Newton as a Newton City Councilor. I've been really vocal in supporting our various efforts at increasing our affordable housing stock, and in particular, just voted in support of a project called the Northland Project, which is, I believe, our city's largest single infusion of affordable housing in our city's history. If it's not the biggest, it's among the biggest. You know, right now, I mentioned earlier confronting the history of redlining, which is very real. And, you know, we know how young people starting out their lives haven't been able to afford to come back to the communities that they were raised in. We know, especially for older adults who have lived in these communities for decades or longer, that they get priced out of being able to stay, particularly once they get to fixed income. And there's a lot more that the federal government could be doing to incentivize state and local governments to be doing the right thing with respect to housing. So, you know, I talk a lot about the incentives that the federal government could put into place to really be rewarding communities that are doing the right thing, that are taking the hard look at their zoning practices and dismantling you know, outdated zoning practices that, you know, that, and especially those that have come out of that history of redlining. I also think that affordable housing and moving forward on it goes hand in hand with investing in infrastructure and transportation. And as we're coming out of the pandemic eventually, hopefully soon, that we're going to have to think about how we're going to put millions of people back to work. This is a moment where investing in infrastructure and putting in an infrastructure package together can achieve our climate goals in creating green jobs, can really make tremendous progress on the transportation systems in our Commonwealth and in this district that we know are outdated and desperately in need of investment, and open up affordable housing opportunities, because multifamily transit-oriented development and thinking about how that goes hand in hand also with economic revitalization, small business development. All of this comes together in designing the communities that we want to see in the future and making those a reality.
Yeah, I thought one of the great things you pointed out in there as well, because this is maybe one of the bigger issues, is developers are financially incentivized to build luxury homes over building affordable housing. And you actually talk about incentivizing developers to build affordable housing. So just having that option of a developer being incentivized for that is a great way to think about why these affordable houses aren't being built. So I love that you had that in there as well. I only have a couple. Yeah, I only have a couple more questions for you because I know that we're very busy. These types of interviews are great for allowing you the opportunity to really talk about your issues. I know in debates it's tough to get everything you want to say in 30 seconds. So
Can be.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But so I wanted to give you the opportunity. Tell us about. I haven't brought up everything, obviously, that you're running on or that you care deeply about. Is there any other topics that you want to bring up to our Medfield residents that you feel strongly about?
Yeah, a few things. I'd say first, the unconscionable cost of prescription drugs in this country. And I talk a lot on the campaign trail about my mom and the experience that I've had in helping my parents navigate the incredibly fractured healthcare system that we have in this country. And my mom went from being healthy and vibrant and active one day to being incredibly sick the next. It turned out that she was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease, and it is not okay that it costs thousands of dollars a year in prescription drug costs in order for her to stay alive. And it is not okay that families all over our district and our Commonwealth and our country have to choose between the roof over their head or the food on the table or the cost of prescription drugs. And, I believe really strongly in allowing the federal government to negotiate prescription drug prices, in capping out-of-pocket costs, in allowing the importation of prescription drugs from safe, vetted trading partners, and and in making sure that we're treating healthcare as a human right, and that we've got quality, affordable healthcare for everybody in this country. So that's one issue. Another one that I want to raise that we haven't talked about is the climate emergency. And this is something that not only we know is a long-term threat, but is here today already, that we already see the effects of it. And early on in the campaign, when the first youth climate strike was happening in Boston, I had the opportunity to speak to some high school students who stopped by Newton City Hall on their way down to Boston. And one young woman was talking to her about her motivation for being there. And she said to me, "What's the point of getting an education if we're not going to have a planet to live on?" That really stayed with me. And, I'm somebody who wakes up every day thinking about what's going to be in the long-term best interest for our kids and the generations to come. And, thinking about how we can create the green future that we want and need and make it a reality as quickly as possible is something that is really important to me.
And that's work that you've been doing for a long time now. I read that as an at-large Newton City Councilor, you work specifically with the schools, the infrastructure, making sure that they're more green, and working on school transportation problems. So that's something that you've already been doing and already been working on.
And I'm really proud of the Newton City Council's efforts and Newton's efforts in general. I think this is a really core value in our community that a lot of folks have done a lot of hard work to contribute to. With respect to school buildings, that is a topic that I am really passionate about, especially as a parent to two young kids in our public schools, and had the opportunity to participate very deeply in designs for rebuilding the school that will house our pre-K program in Newton. And we've got an opportunity in all these buildings. I think, like a lot of communities in this district, Newton's got schools that are almost 100 years old in many cases. And while we're designing the educational spaces that we want our kids to have access to, which is really important, we can simultaneously be improving them from a climate perspective and making progress on two core values while doing a lot of good.
Becky, the one thing I've seen in almost all of your issues that we've brought up today and that are on your website is the importance that you put on education, getting people affordable education, giving people options for education, getting people, different choices of what they can do in secondary education, but just even pre-K all the way to college, you have fully integrated education as an important resource for people to go through to improve their position in life. And I think that that's a really inspiring thing that you really have throughout all of your issues going on. So that's been really inspiring to see.
No, I appreciate it. When I think about education, I actually really think about my grandfather, who was instrumental in my life. And we all have our immigrant stories. And for me, my grandfather came here from Poland. His family was incredibly fortunate to make their way here in escaping, really getting out of Poland before the Holocaust. And, he came here not knowing a word of English. Showed up at a public school that gave him a chance, earned his way to afford scholarships for higher education, eventually became a dentist. And 2 generations later, I sit before you, a candidate for Congress. I am here because of what this country gave an opportunity to him and to generations in my family. And that's a story that doesn't exist for people in the same way today that it did. And I think education is incredibly important as a pathway for lifting people up and improving quality of life, which is what this is all about.
That's awesome. I have 2 more questions for you. So one is a personal question, one that I've asked all the candidates, and it's a personal interest of mine. You'll see why in a second. But
Sure.
so obviously now throughout this, not only just COVID-19, but I think even outside of that, you've been working with access stations. You've been working with Milford last week. You did the debate on their station. You met on Brookline this past Tuesday as well on their local station. And now you're talking to Medfield TV. I'm sure you've talked to other stations as well. What has your experience been like with access television? And when you get in office, are you going to continue to use us as a resource for yourself?
Absolutely. My earliest experiences with access television are in Newton, and New TV does a really great job in
Amazing.
Newton of covering what's going on in our community. And it's been an incredibly important resource. I think we've seen how hard it can be for our local communities to just have access to information about these, not just this race, but what our local governments, what our state governments, what our federal government is doing. It's just information is so critical. And I think that, in addition to what you're providing on television, the content then is available in other formats online and through social media channels. And I really value it and really hope to be able to come back often.
Awesome. Thank you so much. The last question I have for you is one, just the Medfield residents, like I've said before, a lot of great candidates that are running, a lot of different options for them, but why should they cast their ballot for Becky Grossman in the upcoming election?
I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that out of 435 members of Congress, we only have 25 who are mothers of school-aged children. Imagine what we could do if we had 100 or 250 moms of young kids in Congress. Imagine the progress we could make on tackling the climate emergency. Imagine the progress we could make in keeping our communities, our streets, and our schools safe from gun violence. Imagine how we could provide quality, affordable healthcare to everybody. Imagine how we could enact universal pre-K. Uh, it's a lens and a passion in which I see the issues that I feel I bring to this race as a mom to two young kids, and a passion and a commitment that I wake up with every day, thinking about how we are going to make this world and leave this world in the best possible shape that we can for our families today and for young people to come. That is what I bring to this race, what I'm proud to offer. I ask for the vote and support of everybody out there who is watching this today. And I really thank you for the opportunity to spend some time and dive into my platform and the issues, and very much hope to continue the conversation.
Well, Becky, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, giving the residents here in Medfield another option for Congress, and absolutely thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.